but you still want to hear what we talk about, we will get this uploaded to YouTube. And I think I've got to go back in and check, because I have uploaded last month's session, but it hasn't published. So I think I must still have it set to private, or I messed up the date that I wanted it to go live. So welcome, everyone. My name's Mark O'Shea, and I think I'll let Stephen do a quick introduction as well. And Ben's not here, so we haven't eliminated Ben. We haven't crossed his name off the list of people that we had to serve vengeance on or anything like that.
Maybe.
He just ended up accidentally double booking himself, as he basically was somewhat surprised that he'd committed to something else tonight. So we'll jump in and just sort of go through the agenda quickly, and then start working through some of the items. So I guess the first thing that we'll sort of jump into next is just anyone who's new, or anyone who wants to do a quick introduction, please jump in and feel free to do so. Now, this month's What's New is fairly short, because not all that much is really, I was sort of going through the list of things, and I was kind of scraping things together around some of the things that are new. Now, there's a couple of things in the pipeline that we really want to talk about, but we had a few false alarms thinking that certain things would be things we can talk about this month, but we've had to push those out until next month.
Let's be honest, Mark. Everything got announced last month at Ignite, and this month everybody's just catching their breath and trying to digest what's come out previous month.
So a few of the Ignite announcements, like some of the things that were going into preview, etc., have started to show up, but I haven't really sort of thrown too much in if it was something that we'd already covered last month when we were going through quickly through some of the relevant Ignite announcements that are in there. And then I'll hand over to Steve to cover off settings catalog. Now, I think Ben was actually going to cover this, wasn't he?
No, I was.
Oh, you were? Okay. I wasn't sure if Ben dumped you in it, or if you were going to be covering it anyway. So I guess just first of all, just if anyone who's new or hasn't made an appearance for a while, if either unmute and say hi, or alternatively, if you're more comfortable dropping a message into chat, we don't really mind which way. Now, it's also okay if you sit there and lurk, but I think it's a bit better for you if you do decloak at least to a degree, so that we can say hi to you. So I'll just give a minute in case anyone wants to jump in and say hi. Oh, we've got Stuart's crickets coming back.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I could get away with that. See, in the office during the day, it's quite quiet, but at night, the crickets come out. So I'm Stuart with crickets. Like I said, I've worked with MDM for a while. Just started picking up Windows 10. So quite curious around that. I work as an architect in this space. So lots to learn. I like the fact that this is quite new for everyone. So it's not like I'm coming into it, a technology that's sort of, quite mature. I like how everyone's sort of learning, and we're all learning from each other. So, I just thought I'd join today and see what's going on. And thanks a lot for organising the session.
Oh, excellent. So I guess the good news here, with what you were saying, is because this stuff is getting ramped, it's there are so many updates coming through at such a pace. You take your eye off the ball for a couple of months and you've missed a ton of stuff. I guess that's just the joy of living in the cloud era is, you just have to be really good at catching up when you need to.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, if no one else is jumping in, let's just go through. So for the new features, it's really just two things that we'll go through this month. Two things that had things that stood out a little bit. So on Intune and as always, Azure AD. Now, because Stuart deliberately came along to hear about some Windows stuff, you'll notice that we've got nothing Windows in this list. So I did that specifically for you, Stuart. I predicted the future.
Thanks, man.
Because look, in a lot of cases, the window, like new MDM capabilities in Windows, etc. I guess there's usually two parts to it. There's it might be something that in a Windows Insider build starts to expose, that the Intune, that Intune and endpoint management teams might go through and start exposing some of that preview functionality. But normally, yes. So I think next month, I'm hoping that the 0-day patching stuff becomes general, goes into public preview. That was supposed to be in public preview. I think they said it should be in public preview in March, and we're now in April. So hopefully, their extended version of March means that we're going to be seeing some of that soon. But just some of the, I guess, just here, because a lot of the time we don't really do all that much on the cross-platform side. We do tend to be a bit more focused on the Windows side, because that's a lot of our, that's really what I guess most of our backgrounds have been traditionally. But here on the iOS and Android side, the ever-increasing list of non-Microsoft apps that are appearing in protected apps. Now, it always makes me happy when I see some of these additional apps appearing, because for years it really was just the Office mobile apps and their variations that appeared in the protected apps. Whereas now you've got, you do have, it's probably like a 50-50 mix of Microsoft versus third-party apps that are in there. Now, on the Mac OS side, just the speed at which now you've got the M1 native versions of Intune management capabilities, the M365 apps, and Edge native. So this one is, I guess, what's sort of impressed me with this, in terms of how quickly they've done it, is that they didn't need to really rush these things out at the rate that they have, because they've the current versions would have been running, even though they wouldn't have been running natively. But I think it's just I guess it's just a good story that they can actually cross-compile over to M1. So basically, moving everything from Intel over to ARM architecture in a pretty short time frame. So, so that's something that I thought was kind of interesting. And I also just wanted to check to see if anyone has actually gone out and just bought either one of the M1 laptops, or like a Mac Mini M1 or anything along those lines. Has anyone gone out and done that yet, just to test things out?
We'll take that as a no. I know it's on our roadmap, Mark. We'll be covering it in the Intune training.
Oh, excellent!
Sometime.
So one of the things now is you can get Parallels. There's now a native Parallels version for M1 architecture, which will run Windows on ARM in there as VMs. So if you want a way to run Windows on ARM at high performance without it going through an emulator, then there you go. That kind of seems like overkill in order to achieve that goal.
Putting it out there, Windows on ARM doesn't have all of the endpoints fully exposed for Intune. Just to make everybody aware of that. And
it's you can get Home and Pro for ARM, can't you? But I don't think there'd be Enterprise ARM.
I believe there is Enterprise ARM.
Oh, okay. I've got to go and look at the image library to see what's there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Well, you have to remember that Enterprise is just a SKU upgrade from Pro. So all your media is going to be Pro, and then it's just an in-place upgrade to Enterprise.
Yeah. And then final thing, just over on Android, that Launcher continues to get more capabilities for working with Enterprise, Android Enterprise. And also one of the things that we did discuss last month, saying that it was coming, but it wasn't out yet, was now the Defender for Endpoint client for Android does include the tunnel capabilities as well. But I think the tunnel app is still available as a standalone app for now. But once it comes out of public preview and becomes generally available, then that means that the tunnel app, people who are using that will need to start, gradually or maybe aggressively decommissioning the Tunnel app on Android and moving over to Defender for Endpoint for that functionality. Okay, now on the AAD front, just a couple of the things in here. So I've got two that are kind of that I call, I think, a yin and yang. We'll get to those in a second. But for conditional access, now going through the device registration process so that if you need to use MFA, but basically being able to have a policy in place that allows you to go through that MFA registration process without getting blocked because the device isn't registered for MFA. So basically, instead of getting trapped because you need MFA, but you can't register for MFA. So that's now in public preview. The external identity self-service sign-up using a one-time passcode, that's now in public preview. Now, the next two, the ADFS sign-in logs being integrated with AAD sign-in reporting has gone into public preview. So for people who need to keep using ADFS, then this is a way you'll start being able to sort of correlate sign-in data just from that single, from simpler reporting rather than you having to figure out how to aggregate those. But then so that's
just a quick one, Mark. I'd be curious. Could I get a show of hands of how many people are still using ADFS?
That is an excellent response.
I'm very happy with that response. There's no wrong answer. Well, no, who? Although, John, your ADFS might be different to everybody else's. Okay, cool. So we've got a couple.
Well, it's from previous.
Okay,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's still in use out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then sort of talking about moving away from ADFS, rather than sort of having to do a cutover from ADFS to password hash sync or cloud authentication or pass-through authentication, you can now do, or the staged rollout has now hit generally available. So I guess that means that for orgs that have been sitting on ADFS for years and have just been really nervous about moving away from it.
Let's be honest, Mark, they're still sitting on ADFS v2 being on server 2012 R2 because they're concerned of going to ADFS v3 on 2016 because it was an architectural change.
And a lot of their scripts won't work for deployment and maintenance.
That's right, yep.
But don't we just tell them to use the AAD Connect wizard to set up ADFS?
I'm not going to go down that path, Mark. I'm not an Active Directory expert.
That demos really well in an environment where you don't have load balancers and firewalls and other things that might actually be required in a real deployment.
Yes.
So I think what was it? It was some of the, it's been a while since I've looked at it, but it was either related to some of the things you had to do to let WinRM or doing PowerShell remoting stuff through that was a little bit uncomfortable at times in terms of what you needed to do to make it to work. Like, it's not that it was difficult, it was just that make sure you close that as soon as you've done what you need to.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the other thing here is just it's not specifically that MS Graph now has the company branding resource type in there. It's just more that, MS Graph does continue to keep getting additional capabilities added into it. So nothing too major there, but there are some additional things coming up that should be going into public preview pretty shortly on conditional access that will definitely warrant us doing another session within a month or two on just basically all the what's new and rethinking some of the approaches you've taken to conditional access, especially taking into account some of the in-session risk controls, etc. that that have been announced. So I was hoping we'd have those for this month, but unfortunately not. Now, that's really it for me for this one. I'm going to hand over to Stephen now. So I'll let Stephen take control of the session, and I'll mute myself, and I'll let Stephen drive the settings catalog conversation.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Congratulations, it's all yours now.
Woohoo! All right, let me just figure out how to share with my new UI. Okay, let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, all good.
Yay, people can see my screen. All right, so obviously we're just going to quickly dive into what the session catalog is and why you should be using it. For those out there that haven't really done much with Intune previously, I'll show you what we have today or what previously was there, and then we'll step into that session catalog so you can see the experience and why it's been improved. So we're going to start off in the Meemac portal, so aka.ms/Meemac, and we're going to go across to the configuration profiles under devices. In here, you'll see that I've got a few policies in here. Some of them are Android, some of them are Windows 10. So if I go and grab a standard profile today or previously, and we go and select Windows 10, we now have this settings catalog and the previous template. So I'm just going to grab the templates just to show you what we have today or what was there previously. So we're then going to go and go, all right, we want to set, I'm going to use a really tongue-in-cheek demo here, but I want to set my BitLocker policies. So which setting template do I need to go to for BitLocker? Does anybody know off the top of their head? Oh, Andy's typing. Endpoint protection. Yes, correct. So we have to know where we're going to be able to set these policies. So then if we go and select endpoint protection, we grab this and we're going to call this our BitLocker. Yeah. We're going to use our awesome emojis because we can use emojis for our characters. And we're going to then step across. So from here, we can go and step into it, and I picked the wrong policy. There we go. Oh no, Windows encryption, because it's encryption, not BitLocker. We're requiring it to be encrypted, and we're going to then step in here. But then say, for example, you want to go and change one of these, it's going to set all those policies. The other part is once you've applied this policy, you only have the option to say not configured. So it's a by state configuration. So there's some limitations to this. And certain policies, when you remove them, they don't actually remove the setting, or you can't just go, I want it to be not configured. It goes from denied or allowed. So this is part of that whole conversation of why do we want to go down this path and go down session settings catalog. So we've gone in and we're all right, we just want that. And we step it all the way across, and we've got our awesome BitLocker policy, and we can see all of that information. And it's based on a template. So that template is actually sitting over the top of a whole heap of OMA URIs, which are the custom configuration settings underneath it, or how the sync engine for Intune does translates the information across. So it's pretty straightforward if you knew what you're doing. I have a glitch in my UI. That's pretty cool. Anyway, let's go back over here. So we know we had to go to endpoint protection. Straight away, that's a little bit unwieldy. You don't know which policy you want to go to set certain configuration settings. Setting the wallpaper, setting things like that was really not straightforward. So what was added was settings catalog. So if we then go here and select our Windows 10 profile and settings catalog, what this does is rather than sitting there and going, we want to have I'll give it a name. And rather than having a template sitting there, it just starts out as an empty policy set. And it says, we want you to define what settings you want to define. So we go here, we select the add settings option. And we go and scroll through. And straight away, we can see BitLocker there. It will load up and it'll go, all right, what settings do you want to set? Well, I want to set all three of those. So it now comes and shows all the information here. And we can go and remove the setting to say not configured, or we can just go, look, we want the allow the warning, but we actually don't. We want to disable that, but we want to allow standard users. And then we want to go require disk encryption. Cool. That's all we need to do to set that policy. So what that gives us is the ability to sit there and change how the configuration is. But if we don't want to set this setting, rather we just want it just to be set to the default, we can just remove it and say it's not configured, it's all happy days. And then we have, oh, look, you have to have that policy to do that standard setting. So we're going to undo that and it'll appear back there. So when we go to the add settings, we can go through and set a whole heap of policies in here. So practically, and it's still growing, this list is going to end up being, for all intrinsic purposes, the group policies that you've used previously. You'll be able to go in and set most of them. I'm not going to say all of them because some of them don't translate across all that well. So say, for example, you want to go to the control panel and we're going to personalize it. We can go in here, we're going to select all these things, and we're going to select all these programs. What that then allows us to do is we can see our categories here, and it breaks it down so it formats it in an easy to use UI. Then we go, all right, from a personalization point of view, we don't want to show a lock screen. We're going to enable the user profile to have a screensaver, and we're going to force a background. We can do all of our settings in that single policy. So rather than having to build your baseline configuration of, say, 10, 15, or even 3 policies, you can have them all in the one configuration setting and see how that looks on the device straight away. So how much easier is that compared to what we looked at previously? I'm going to take that as a, everybody thinks it's awesome and they are awed and shocked at how easy that was. Yes, yay, I got a thumbs up. So there's a couple of things we can do around all of this. Obviously we can leave these as default with the disabled, and that's going to make it disabled and show anything setting there. This is a huge difference where we're using that tri-state configuration. So if you don't have that setting there, it is going to be set to not configured, which is super, super important because it's going to give you that experience you had with group policy, rather than sitting there and saying, you have to define a setting, whether it's on or off, which was the previous setting, which was the by-state configuration. So there's some really good advantages around that. It gives you some awesome tooltips about what's going on. Typically, this is going to be what was on the group policy, but you can click through that and find out more information about that. So you can see there's an ADMX policy, that it's going to be the control panel, personalization, no lock screen. It applies to enterprise, and then we can step in and find out all the relevant information about that CSP. So it gives you that rich information, rather than just saying, well, here's a random link that goes off to information. So is there any questions around this stuff? Because I can sit here and waffle, but I'd like to get interaction. So is there anything you'd like to know about the settings catalog or associated components? Wow, tough crowd.
Okay, I'll make some questions up for you.
Please.
Okay, so seeing that this is now different to, because we've now got tri-state settings, etc. I guess other flow-on effects potentially then is it still going to be the same story with like things like conflict resolution? where you basically have to just sort of keep an eye out for conflicts. Is there anything else built in that's going to assist with that?
No, you'll still be looking for the conflict resolution, but what you'll see here is it actually has the new reporting engine over the top of it. So it gives you more information around that. So if I go back to devices and I grab that policy I created previously, it's still showing the donut with all that data points.
Yeah.
Whereas if we go and look at the settings catalog, we can see that it's now using the new reporting engine. So that's going to give you more information around that conflict, as well as any other data points on there. But you'll still need to be looking for your own conflicts and understanding if there's any issues there. It's just how the service is built today. So it doesn't accumulate or do prioritization on those policies.
Yeah.
So if there is a conflict, it will call it out. All right, so just to come back to Jeron's question, yes, it'll be easier to do the to migrate it between settings catalog and group policy, because they're going to be pretty much a one-to-one setting. For the existing templates, no. And I know the next question is going to be which set or which engine should I be using, or which process should I be using? Should I continue using the existing templates, or should I use the settings catalog? My personal recommendations is to use settings catalog, because that's where you're going to see a lot more innovation happening and a lot more changes occurring. As you can see, it's presenting more information. There are some things that are still not there yet. So all of the settings are being tested, validated before they appear in the portal. We actually did a really good talk with this on the Intune training channel with Mike Dano, who's the program manager for this. And he explains that whole process on how they do that validation to make sure that CSPs are ready and good to go. But the simple answer is there are more settings coming. My understanding is it's going to probably triple. So the question from Justin is, how do I sit there and apply to a single test device? To do that, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a group. I don't know what groups I have in this tenant because I haven't used it in a while. Let's go and grab, let's just create a new group. And we'll continue on with our theme of awesomeness being emojis. And then we can go in here and we can specify our member. So we go and say, all right, our computer is going to be, and you'll note that you can actually do nested groups now. Please don't do nested groups. Nested groups are bad. So we're going to go create our group. It will be easily to spot because it's going to have the emojis for its name. And we can see here, that's it there. We're going to grab that name and we're going to go across back to our policy. And we go configuration profiles. We grab our settings catalog, and this is where we're going to assign it to that single test device. So it's the same process as we'll use for standard deployments where we only include it for that group. So we add our group, we'll try it at the top. Awesome, we hit select, we hit save, done. And that's going to make it available out to just that one device. So that's always test your policies on test devices first before deploying them out to production, because if you don't test it on your test devices, you could run into issues. I'm not going to say you're going to, but there's a good chance you'll run into issues around that. So it's always best practice to test and validate to make sure you don't have conflicts, to make sure that everything works correctly. And this is one of the 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 good things around Intune is the ability to sit there and say, just for this security group, we can only apply these settings, and that's how it's going to be applied. So to come back to Andy's question, it won't completely supersede, but it's the direction where the team's going. Is probably the best way to position it. Because there's a couple of settings that won't come across, but for the most part, they'll all appear in there. And Andy, can you apply multiple settings across categories with one configuration profile? Yes. So you can go and create one profile that includes all of your settings that you want in your environment, so long as they appear in the catalog. So if we go here, we can go add settings. So right now, you won't see anything around Office, but it's going to appear eventually, is my understanding. But you have the ability to go in there and set a whole heap of cool stuff. So you can even set your Windows Update for Business policies in here now. We go select those. And we minimize that, and here is our Windows Update for Business policies. I'm curious, does it still include the delivery optimization processes? No, good. But what you'll note is there's a lot more settings in here than there are in the standard Windows Update for Business policy. So this is where it gives you that more flexibility, and you'll see features will appear in here quicker because it's quicker to go in and update the catalog than it is to go and change a template. And that's why settings catalog is going to be the better place to start off. All right, so what guidance recommendation are being made with monolithic policies versus a policy per category? Comes down to personal preference, but if you've got an organization that needs to have granularity around making exceptions for controls and control planes, you may want to split it out, or you may want to say, well, I'm going to have everything but these settings, and they're going to be a granular policy to themselves. It comes down to personal preference. My personal recommendation is try and put everything into one policy because it's easy, but there's always going to be a situation where you may need to bypass or exclude a control or a configuration. So understand that you may need to come back and assess it and change that at a later date. Does that make sense, Mark? And now Mark's not coming off mute. Awesome.
I typed in yep.
I know.
Okay, we'll see that you got me off mute. Then I guess the other thing then is that so now if we look at some of the where we can sort of do some of the security settings,
yep.
And now settings catalog, as well as your traditional profile settings. So now we've got potentially three places to set some of the same options.
Yes.
I love choice.
I do too. Do you have a question there, Mark?
I think the question is embedded in the statement.
What I would say is settings catalog and things like that. That's going to be your Intune administrator that has permissions to that.
Yeah.
If you're needing to run an organization that has a dedicated security team and you want to give them access to visibility of configurations for the security plane, it may make sense to put it in here. And the reason for that is because they have visibility to manage those configurations for your security components. And that's what that blade is all about, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no,
it all,
that makes sense. Looking at it in terms of who's responsible for administering the role, if that's definitely going to play a role. Yeah.
So if you're a small organization or you don't have a dedicated security team that's managing settings and going in and reviewing things, it might not make sense to use that endpoint security blade. But if you're wanting to do a large organization, you've got specialized engineers in the security team managing policies and configurations, endpoint security blade is awesome, and it works exactly how you would expect it to. So it just comes down to the requirements for the customer. So while if you look at Intune, 12 months, 18 months ago, it was you do everything through settings, through configuration profiles, and that's it, right? Mark, you'd remember this. This was very Drake, and this is how you have to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're bringing in the ability to have flexibility to match it to what you need for your organization. Does it bring in confusion? Yes, but it also gives you a lot more flexibility on how you need to set it up in your environment.
Yeah, and I guess just the usual recommendation that carries across all of it is don't mix and match settings within the same category across the different tools.
Well, they all will come back to when we go to the device. When we look at a device, you'll be able to see straight away if there's conflicts of those policies because they all appear in the device configuration section. So if there's conflicts, you'll see straight away, this doesn't match with this, you need to go and change it, and it will give you the breakdown of the setting that's actually broken.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yep. Because you still need to have that overarching understanding of what's going on for that device. Cool. Is there any other questions around this stuff? Or are we happy to have a short session and we can do some Q&A just random? Awkward silence. Awesome. I'm going to take it that there's no other questions for this topic because I can't think of anything else to talk through.
Yep.
So I'm going to open up to everybody. Is there anything else anybody would like to talk about? And we can turn off the recording if you want.
Yeah, I'll stop the recording now in case there's stuff that you don't actually want there. I'm not saying that you're going to ask questions you'll regret